We're in pursuit of becoming anti-fragile, and today we're going to look at why change feels so challenging, what happens in the mind, what happens with the nervous system, and towards the end we'll explore strategies for staying open, overcoming resistance to change, and staying the course long enough to experience true transformation. Let's dive in. To become anti-fragile, we have to train the body, mind, and nervous system to stay in uncertainty and discomfort. And this will actually require a new identity that we develop through new habits and new actions. When we have that new identity, something exciting happens, that we shift from using force to create change, willing it to happen, making it to happen, grinding it out, and instead we start to gain power, momentum, even energy and enthusiasm through change. So how do we make that shift? And also, what's going to keep us in the grind and the forcing? And how do we make the momentous leap into this power, which is anti-fragility? We have a model for embracing the different elements of your body, mind, nervous system, and spirit, and this helps you navigate change and transformation. So you have an animal body that's oriented towards safety, pleasure, and comfort. You also have a human mind that's always looking for the seen, the known, the predictable, and the controllable. And you also have a spirit, and this is what calls you into adventure, growth, expansion, evolution, and metamorphosis. And you want to be asking, who's driving? What am I chasing? Because animal body and human mind will keep you limited in what's safe, what's comfortable, what's pleasurable, what's known, what's controllable. But spirit is where our heart sings. And this is where we experience new growth and transformation and change. And that sounds nice, but it's not so easy because we encounter something called Mount Stupid. Mount Stupid is the height of ignorance. It's when you have untested, untried confidence. You're ready to begin something new. You're ready to make that change, but you promptly fall off because you see how far you have to go. You know that you're lacking in skills or knowledge, and you see that there's much more to this than you might have first envisioned. And at that point, when you fall off Mount Stupid, you end up in the valley of despair, and animal body, human mind will want to get you out of there. And what we're going to see soon is that's not just a mindset thing. It is actually a neurobiological cascade that's an evolutionary pre-setting that's designed to keep you safe and help you survive. So we have to override these deep principles of animal body, human mind in order to trudge through the valley of despair, make it up the slope of enlightenment, and have that growth, change, transformation that we're after. So that's what we're going to look at today. What happens in the animal body, human mind, when we encounter the valley of despair, and how to use spirit, the higher mind, our higher self, to stay with the process and experience transformation. When you're healing deeply ingrained patterns of the animal body or the human mind, it does not feel good at all. It'll feel wrong, not me, or even like dying. Let me give you an example. Most women are conditioned to be people-pleasing. Our stress response is fawn. So saying no, setting boundaries, taking care of yourself can feel wrong. Not me. I'm a type of person who says, yes, I do the thing. I take care of everyone else. And it can even feel like death, and that your nervous system starts to truly freak out, thinking it will not get the love, support, connection it needs to survive. This is what makes change so challenging, is you're going against the grain. There's tremendous friction, what the yogis call tapas. And the friction is not just mental, it is neurobiological. Why? Change equals uncertainty equals not safe to the animal body and the human mind. And that's for us individually, but also the people around us. Anytime you're making a change, doing something different, it will rub up against these same neurobiological processes for the people around you, especially the people closest to you. So important and compassionate to remember that the unfamiliar is coded as dangerous. And to override what will happen in your animal body and your human mind takes training. And that's what we're going to look at today. What's happening? What makes change so challenging? And then how do we train ourselves to not just endure it, but embrace it? Not just force ourselves through it, but actually gain power from it. So we're going to go through a couple studies and models about the brain and what makes change so challenging. The first comes from Carl Friston's free energy principle, and he states that the brain is a prediction machine and that it's constantly comparing incoming sensory data against internal models to reduce uncertainty. And then any change, whether it's emotional, physical, or behavioral, seems like something's wrong. He calls this a predictive error. So what's safe is not necessarily healthy or optimal. It's just what's predictable. And this is why people tend to recreate situations in their work, relationships, health habits. The mind is seeking the predictable. And when you try something new, it doesn't have a map for that. It doesn't know what to do. So it tempts you to revert to the old behavior. Similar but different is Leon Festinger's 1957 theory of cognitive dissonance. This states that when your actions conflict with your identity or beliefs, you experience psychological discomfort. And then instead of changing your identity or your beliefs, most people revert to ingrained behaviors. This includes justifying the old behavior, denying, diminishing the benefits of the new to avoid the discomfort of the inner conflict. This is very similar to stage 2 of competency, the unconscious incompetence that gets so uncomfortable that most people will revert to the old habit, deny the benefit of the new. So to do something new, you often have to become someone new and tolerate that cognitive dissonance, that inner rub, that inner friction long enough to rewrite your identity through your actions and through your new beliefs about yourself. James Clear echoes this relationship between identity and action. He says the most effective way to change your habits is to focus not on what you want to achieve, but on who you wish to become. Let me give you an example. Instead of thinking, I want to get stronger, which is an outcome, James Clear would encourage you to shift your identity into someone who does strength training 2 times a week. Then your habit will reinforce your identity, and your identity will reinforce your habit, and eventually you become strong. The transformation isn't coming from the habit so much as who you become when you follow through. Once you've established the new identity, it's easier to maintain the habit and behavior that supports the identity. But identity is hard to shift too, and partially because the nervous system is wired to seek familiar pain and circumstances over unfamiliar possibility. This is very similar to what we talked about with the brain and the mind, but now we're looking through the lens of the nervous system. For example, Huberman Lab, attachment theory, and polyvagal theory all point to this deep human tendency to revert to familiar emotional pain over unfamiliar possibility, because the limbic system, especially the amygdala, has learned how to metabolize familiar stress. Even if it's miserable, it's predictable, it's known. The human mind and the animal body feels better with the known than the unknown. Further linking identity and action is the dopaminergic system, which becomes trained to release dopamine even during self-destructive behavior if it's linked to reward. So we see this cycle of being addicted to certain patterns of behavior and activity, which makes them harder to change. Huberman says the nervous system doesn't distinguish between good and bad, it distinguishes between predictable and unknown. Attachment theory explains that your early relationships form your internal working models for love, safety, and identity. And those early emotional blueprints get played out in adult life. For example, if love was conditional, you often find yourself hustling and earning love. And if you're not doing enough, then you feel unlovable, unworthy, and or unsafe because you're not going to have your same place in the tribe. Similarly, if love was chaotic, your system equates instability with intimacy, connection, and belonging. And then you may subconsciously seek partners, jobs, experiences that replay this tone of childhood. And again, even if it's painful, even if it's miserable, even if destructive, it's normal and will be coded as safe, predictable, and we tend to return to that. Similarly, polyvagal theory explains how the autonomic nervous system scans for safety and danger via neuroception, a subconscious body-based detection system. And if your system was wired in an environment of threat, chaos, or pain, then things like love, calm, and stillness can feel dysregulating. Unpredictable, unknown equals unsafe. Similarly, the ventral vagal, that safe social state, may be unfamiliar and the body rejects it, wants to run from it, fight, flee, or shut down around it. But the sympathetic, the fight or flight, might feel normal. These are the people who go, 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 do, can't slow down. Or dorsal vagal, that shutdown, numbness, despair might be what's safe and normal and predictable. And this is when people can't get out of cycles of despair, the Eeyore, melancholy phenomena, or even get stuck in depression. So once again, familiar and safe is what we tend to seek and repeat unless we do something to change it. Nietzsche says, what is familiar is what we are used to, and what we are used to is most difficult to know. Trauma work provides endless examples of under the thinking mind programming running the show. And well-known effective trauma work rarely involves just the thinking mind. It's when we integrate the body and we repattern the nervous system and we're able to get into the space of spirit that opening and releasing and healing happens. Otherwise, the loop, that skipping of the record, continues. Again, change is not just about mindset, willpower, or discipline, because there is a neurobiological cascade that resists change. Your body wants homeostasis, a stable, predictable environment, so it fends off and counteracts change. In nature, evolution happens through necessity because growth requires allostasis, a high-cost response, and a recalibration based on need. And that takes us into our strategies. We've got 3 strategies to help us in this uphill battle of change. Before we get to those strategies, let's review the stuck cycle. You try to change, but then your animal body is in uncertain, uncharted territory and it sounds the alarm. Your mind starts telling stories to justify avoiding the change, and your nervous system is desperately seeking what it already knows. To keep trudging through the valley of despair and make the change you're seeking, you need to self-generate safety. Train the body, mind, nervous system to tolerate uncertainty and discomfort. And at first, this will be enduring. Eventually, it will be embracing. Number 2, make change a necessity. This is where you tap into power rather than force. And it's where change becomes part of the dance rather than a heavy weight. Lastly, transform your identity through your actions, through your habits, through your beliefs. And this is where change shifts from being disempowering, feeling like a victim or you're being forced to change, and into empowering, feel like you're growing and evolving and expanding because of change. Let's take that piece by piece. To reframe and self-generate safety, breathing is essential. It's going to help calibrate your nervous system. Body scans, noticing what is coming up for you. Because remember that based on polyvagal theory, your body is always scanning the environment and then sending those safety or danger signals. And then your mind starts telling the story to explain your state. And as you're learning to feel the body and breathe through things, you can feel your feelings. Not the story about why you're feeling what you're feeling, but the actual feeling. I feel a lump in my throat. I feel butterflies in my stomach. There's a hollow pit. I'm tense in my shoulders because I'm actually very threatened by what was just said to me. Now, as you learn to breathe, feel, sense what's arising, then you can also start to shift what's happening through sound and visuals. For example, Joe Dispenza, in his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, he suggests saying change out loud when you find yourself stuck in a state or a story. I find that I can occasionally say change out loud, but often not, so I have to use another strategy. And I imagine change with like a lightning flash and thunder. So it's this big boom. And it's, yes, the word, but it's more the visual and the sound that literally shakes me out of whatever's arising. Similarly, Ed Milet says he imagines like a record being scratched when he is stuck in a story or a narrative or a state. And I encourage you to find a visual and a sound that works for you. Similar but different, and another way to create safety inside is the welcoming technique of the Sedona method. This is like welcoming whatever you're feeling, and you can have whatever image works for you with that. I imagine like opening a door and letting it come in. Some people imagine like giving it a cup of tea or crawling up in the lap of whatever's arising. Similar to the Sedona method is the Guest House poem by Rumi, and we have a meditation for that on the 20-Minute Miracles app. Strategy 2 is making change a necessity. And this is where you can shift from forcing change to finding power in change, through change, because of change. And that language, power versus force, comes from David Hawkins' work. And where you shift from force and effort, and it's draining on your energy, to power, which is building up your energy, is through willingness. Your willingness to be with what is. And willingness quickly leads you into acceptance. And after acceptance, you start gaining power and momentum. And you can see when you look at this model, how often we're in a very victim-y, external circumstances influencing me relationship to change. So we feel like it's happening to us rather than for us. But as soon as you start shifting that story, it's not happening to me, it's happening for me. I'm willing to be with this. I'm accepting of what's happening. You gain momentum and power through the change. And then you can reframe your relationship to what's happening. A great reframe tool is the gap and the gain by Benjamin Hardy. With the gain, you're looking back and measuring how far you've come, how you're growing and evolving. The gap is looking at where you want to go, how far you have to go. And you could see how that would make the valley of despair and the learning curve much more arduous and, again, disempowering, draining, versus feeling motivated by all that's come before. Another model for making change a necessity and reframing your mindset around it is the let them theory by Mel Robbins. So you let whatever's happening happen, and then let me. And let me is where your power is. I'm going to focus on what I'm doing, where I'm going. Another system for navigating the neurobiological resistance to change is by getting in touch with what or who inside of you is resisting change. Many times when we feel really scared or really resistance, there's a little us inside that is scared or was hurt in a similar situation or developed that coping mechanism. And then there are the protectors, these aspects of us that are like a vicious dog in the face of any change or challenge, or a ostrich hiding our head in the sand. So again, I'm not going to go too far into this, but Relationship Ride by Julia Caldwell is amazing. Internal Family Systems is incredible to help you get in touch with these aspects of you that were developed in response to those early childhood circumstances and maybe running the show when you feel particularly scared, uncertain, unsafe. And remember that any change is going to trigger that uncertain, unsafe biological cascade. To keep going during the uncertainty and unpredictability of change, you will transform your identity through new actions and new habits. One of the ways you transform identity is with I am statements. This comes from Rich Diviney and his book, Masters of Uncertainty. I am statements allow you to step into a different version of yourself. I am strong. I am courageous. I am taking the next step. I'm giving it my all. I'm going to figure it out. Similar but different is developing alter ego. We see David Goggins do this with Goggins. Goggins is that harder, tougher version of himself that can pull him through challenges. Another well-known example is Beyonce. Beyonce identifies as shy and introverted. To have the confidence and the explosive presence on stage, she developed Sasha Fierce and would step into that to get to be the person she wanted to be. Eventually, that aspect of her became integrated. Similar but different, Kobe Bryant, in the face of criticism, he developed what he called the Black Mamba, who could be cold and distant and then give the athletic performance he wanted to give. These new identities create psychological distance, the opportunity for expansion. You're less bogged down by those old stories, coping mechanisms, and personalities, and then you can develop new neural pathways, new behaviors, new habits equal new identities. What does this mean for practice? Practice is the training ground or laboratory for self-generating change. You put yourself in uncomfortable and uncertain positions, and then you breathe and you rewire your nervous system. You transform your relationship to stress and difficulty, and you rewrite your identity in the process. You become a person who can do things like that. And when your identity is different, your behavior is different. Also, all of this information is just to tell you what you're up against, because otherwise you tend to think that's just me. It's everybody. It's a neurobiological cascade. And when you know that, you can prepare for that and you can train for that. Here's some signs this information is taking hold, that it's activated. You notice the signs and signals coming from your body when it's rejecting or resisting change. And you're willing to endure that discomfort and dissonance. You have tools to manage and keep you in the process. And then you start to not just endure, but embrace and look forward to challenge and difficulty, because you know you'll get stronger. You'll become anti-fragile.